Well, then the bigger question would be, why would you still blame someone who has left you for over 60 years? I mean, if we are people who are a bit serious with government, we're not the only country that have been colonized in the past. But if you look at countries that have been colonized 60 years on, they're doing a lot better than we are. So what has happened? Why are we still reeling in the colonization of the British when we can actually come together, put our ass together and get things done our own way?
Thank you very much. That is part of what this program is all about. Is to educate our people to say that we have alternative. We can go back to or fashion something that is better for us. Mr. Cho, as you know, there is no present without a past, and you can't have future without present. So the impact of what happened is great, and it is not something you can wish away so easily. It is so endemic that to remove it will require serious participation from the people. So while we blame the British for what they did, now we blame our own people, much more than we blame the British, because what is happening now is to a certain extent worse than what the British did.
Wow. All right, last week we had the pre- and post-colonial political system in Igbo land, the impact of Warrant Chieftaincy in Igbo land. Few persons may have missed that edition. We'll probably just do a little bit of recap from last week and then bring it down to what we have today, which is from Warrant Chiefs to Igbo. So let's have a recap of what happened last week.
Thank you very much. We discussed that when the white people came, what they met in the northern part was a theocratic system where the Sultan was a sovereign who was overall. And to a certain extent in the west, in Oyo, where you had the Alafin of Oyo, the Oba, who has a certain power. When they came to the eastern part, they asked who is overall, and the people looked around and they said, sorry, there's no one person who has overall authority. Everything has to be discussed. And the British, they were not happy with that at all. Say, okay, you don't have a king, we don't have, so we give you one. And of course, you can know the process through which this one they gave was selected. If they had asked the people to go ahead and select somebody and send to us, in some places it happened, and they rejected the person that the people brought and took the one that they want. So the person they took was working for them and not working for the Igbo people. And there was a complete revulsion against Warrant Chieftaincy in Igbo land. And I told you, by 1929, after the Aba Women Riot, 2930, the British came to the opinion that this cannot work. Yeah, so they dismantled it and removed it and started the Native Authority Administration, which graduated into what we have today. So if the British eventually even stopped Warrant Chieftaincy, so why are we going back to it? So that's the question we're asking. What were the impacts? And the impacts were very negative on all aspects of our culture, which we'll be talking about, other things about culture like language and but that is not the topic of today.
Right.
So we are now graduating from Warrant Chieftaincy to Igweship or Ezeship.
Yes.
And then you ask, how did it start? In 1976, there was a federal edict that specified that every community must appoint a traditional ruler. And I have very big issue with the word traditional ruler. Who are you ruling? If you have used a word that is a little bit milder to say traditional leader, it might be understood. But when you say a ruler, you are talking like a paramount king. And then people begin to take titles like His Royal Highness in a kingdom, like the King of England, King Charles, His Royal Majesty, His Royal Highness. In Igbo land, the Igbo people had already rejected this kind of appellation. So when you say Igwe, so every community was forced. And for me, if you ask me...
Was it constitutional all the time?
Yeah, it was constitutional. It was the military government between 1976 and 1978. Every community was mandated or it was compulsory to do that. And incidentally, Imo State, which included Abia now, in those days, decided to choose the word Eze and not Igwe. So I think Igbo is more predominant in Enugu State and Anambra and maybe in other states. When you look at the word Igwe, the meaning of Igwe is a short form, Igwe Kala, that the heaven is bigger than the land. And when you translate it, what the import of it, the meaning of it is that the king is overall, so he is bigger than everybody in the community. And that is what the Igbo people resisted. You don't have an Igwe Kala. What is the meaning of Igwe? Is it traditional? Even the word traditional ruler, there's nothing traditional in this particular context. When we say that Igbo is the people, maybe some parts of Igbo land practiced semi-kinship. And maybe the whole of Igbo land may have practiced it sometime in the past, and they saw what was going to happen and they rejected it totally, said, no, go to your house and be a king. So now when you have people that are installed as Igwe or Eze, and I mentioned last week that the word Eze is a prefix that is used to describe what somebody does well. It does not translate in Igbo language, the meaning of it. Eze does not translate into king. We didn't have kings. Eze is like a prefix, Eze, whatever you are doing well. It is attached to it like a professional, Eze, somebody who is hunting very well, Eze enter. So that's the original meaning of it in Igbo land, not a king. So you do not have His Royal Highness or His Royal Majesty. That title does not exist anywhere. So when you say traditional ruler, so what is tradition in what you are doing? Because you are importing something that did not exist in the people's culture. And then you are now trying to baptize it to call it tradition. So there's nothing like traditional in traditional ruler.
Did they put into consideration these things before they asked the people to appoint these traditional rulers?
They did not, because it would have been actually, if you ask me, my opinion would be that things like that should go under the residual list. You know, we have 3 types of lists of legislation. We have the exclusive list, which is for the federal government. You have the concurrent list, where the federal and the state may legislate. And then you have the last one, which is a residual list, where the local people, the local government and the local people are supposed to sort out themselves. And then you have a federal government coming from Lagos in those days to come and tell my community to appoint a traditional ruler. So if people have appointed some people to represent them, allow them to do it in the culture the way it will suit them, the way it would have been. And let them use the title that makes meaning in their culture, in the language. So that's where I'm coming from. The word Igwe doesn't make any meaning. And if the people understood what it means, Igwe Kala, you are installing somebody who is now a paramount king that is higher than every other person, a hegemon. You understand? So it was a big mistake, and now this is where the point of my part of our civic education is coming. What is it that is stopping the houses of assembly in Igbo land to come together and say we are abrogating this law, or the National Assembly? Let one of our legislators, the National Assembly, move the motion, and let it be that it was struck down. And then let it go back to the states. Let them legislate. Let it come from the House of Assembly here to say we are abrogating this law that mandated every community to elect a traditional ruler. Let's find other alternatives. Let's do what we call a SWOT analysis of this particular institution you are promoting. What is the value of it to the people? What is the benefit? And then we are looking at the benefits, and we are seeing that the disadvantages are much more than what you might call advantage, if there is any.
All right, we'll look at the disadvantage shortly. But the 1976, I understand it's just 6 years away from the
civilian.
The Civil War. It ended in 1970.
Yes.
So the Civil War ended in 1970. Then 6 years later, when the Constitution came up, immediately they asked that people select who the traditional rulers would be. I'm trying to find out whether you think that the war played any role at all in the way and manner the government at the time decided to deal with matters in that direction. Because we know how Ojukwu was able to galvanize support from the southeast that made it easy for him to go to war. You know, so do you think that the appointment of traditional rulers was part of the means in which the government at the time tried to contain that influence that one person can have over a region?
It could be, but what I'm saying is that it was not necessary at all. The people wanted to have their independence and they were forcefully brought back to join a federation that rejected them. And so they shouldn't intrude more in their own affairs. This is purely something traditional. And if we look back at what the specifications, so the sharing of duties, what is the work of a traditional ruler? The state chieftaincy law says the traditional ruler is in charge of custom and tradition, finish. And he doesn't have any political role at all. And then you have the context now between the traditional ruler who is looking at himself as a paramount king with the appellation of a traditional ruler, and then he takes a title that makes him His Royal Highness, and is now competing with the town union. The constitution says that the town union is in charge of development in the town, and the traditional ruler's hand is not there. But you can see that take any community where the traditional ruler is not intruding, trying to make himself the number one in the community, so he has to be in charge. And even the money that the Enugu state government was giving to communities, the traditional rulers were meant to come and sign, and any community that doesn't have a traditional ruler will not get the money, which I think is wrong. It shouldn't be. Because the town union is the group that is in charge of development and other things but you can see friction between them. You have continuous fight. We migrated from Warrant Chieftaincy into traditional rulership, Igbo-ship, and then it is causing rancor, it's causing recrimination, it's causing antagonism, it's causing strife, and the communities are at war. People are fighting to get the Igbo-ship. And recently here in Enugu, I think about a month or two ago, the Enugu state government instituted a commission for creation of more autonomous communities. They say that they are inundated with petitions for people who want to be autonomous, to have autonomous communities. And this commission is working on it now to make a recommendation to the state government to create more autonomous communities. So the question you ask is, what is it that is autonomous about it? What is autonomous about the communities? Nothing. Bearing in mind that the state government can actually suppress this community anytime they want, they can remove their Igwe at any time they want, or their Eze. And I saw in the what they gave to the commission as their point of reference, that this Igwe can be appointed, it can be selected, and election was the last out of the three: appointment, selection, and then election. And this Igwe can be deposed by the government anytime. So what is it exactly that is gross misconduct? Will the people be asked whether they want to remove their Igwe or not? So the interference of the government in the Igwe-ship makes the whole thing very not quite clear at all. So they are not independent, they don't have any political position. They can be removed if they don't agree with the government. This is where we have a serious issue, is that this Igwe is not supposed to have his personal opinion about political matters. And if he has it, he should shut up and should never say it. And of course, what we see happening is that government is using them as an appendage. So they use them to get the communities to fall in line with what they want to do. So there's nothing autonomous about the community at all.
Right. So, what you're saying is that there isn't any advantage
No.
of someone who is appointed as traditional ruler, because I understand that anyone who is appointed is basically one who is from that community, who knows the culture and tradition of that community and must also stand for it and defend it.
Appointed by who? By the government?
Well, appointed or selected.
That's the
by
point.
government.
So if you call it, so what is tradition here? In the traditional Igbo land, you don't appoint a leader for people. You allow them to do it the way they want it, from their own way. And they have a title that they give to their leader. You don't come overnight and say, what Igwe does not mean anything. If you come to my community and say, what is Igwe? Igwe Kala. As I told you, that is the full meaning of Igwe.
But wouldn't it be worse if the government really never did anything about it? Because you mentioned that there have been chaos about who leads, who takes over, you know. Don't you think it'd be worse if the government is not involved in quelling some of these issues? Because we've seen communities fight over these positions over the time, over the years. Now that government is in, don't you think it's another way of making sure that peace reigns among these communities? So it's in such a way that when when the government speaks, everybody goes home. But if there is no authority well over and above the traditional rulers, it might be difficult finding someone who can represent them as an Eze or an Igwe.
Represent them where?
In a community.
Represent them where? So what is the need of the traditional ruler you are talking about? So the people have a way of selecting those who lead them. What we are making is that it is not necessary at all to appoint a hegemon that is controlled by the state, and you call it a tradition. Every Igbo community has a process through which they select. If they have issue, take for instance the first village in a town of 20 towns. You have the first village is the eldest. If they kill a cow today, they know how to share it. They don't need government to come and tell them how to share it. They know how to share it. And those that it is not their turn will not come to take. And if they want to do it, they have a way to resolve it. So it is like our people are further enslaved. The enslavement that came from the British people is continuing. If the local people cannot even be allowed to do things the way they want it, why is this federal law making it compulsory for every community? And then the fact that the government is actually paying them. The adage, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So the government should not have any hand in it. Whoever the people present to them, they should recognize the person. So I don't think that it was going to be worse if government was. In fact, the first thing is, why do you even have it? Is it necessary? What are the benefits to the people? When we have assassinations and a few, 2 or 3 people in the village come together and they say they want to get autonomous community, and then have they consulted fully the people who they are going to rule? Are they in agreement with it? Or is these people who are looking for positions, 2 or 3, 5, 10 people, they want to promote themselves, and then they go to write that they want an autonomous community?